Welcome back to Hardball. So what effect will Scott McClellan's new book, this barn burner, have, and what are the disclosures in the book about the reasons we really went to war? Will they have an impact on the war in Iraq? Will the book tarnish John McCain, for example, who has to support the war? Will it help Obama? Let's bring in two MSNBC political analysts, Howard Fineman, who's also with Newsweek, of course, and Pat Buchanan has a new book called Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. I want to go to Howard on this. It seems to me what he has in here is sort of the inside man's case against the war. Maybe it's not a new case, but he says that basically the war was fought for a philosophy. We can call it whatever we want. He calls it coercive democracy, that we can take our firepower into the Middle East and create democracy. The WMD really wasn't the reason for the war. Does that give a lot of Republican moderates who are anti-war an excuse now to say, I'm voting against this party. I was never for this war. It turns out they were lying.
I think it may well do that, Chris. I was talking to one of John McCain's people just a little while ago, and they dismissed the notion that it would have much effect because, and this is obviously kind of simplistic, that John McCain never spoke to Scott McClellan, doesn't know Scott McClellan, but obviously the big point is this. Anything that makes it even more clear that the war was sold for misleading reasons strengthens Barack Obama's hand and simultaneously, assuming Obama's the nominee, weakens McCain's, because one of McCain's big arguments is going to be, as he did the other day, was to attack Barack Obama for lack of foreign policy experience, for foreign policy and military experience. Yeah. But Obama can answer back, as he did yesterday and today. Hey, don't lecture me about foreign policy experience and defense experience. You were sold this war and you bought it hook, line, and sinker on propagandistic, misleading arguments, and so that's exactly what Obama is saying.
So, going back to some Watergate history, Patrick, is this John Dean speaking? Is this an insider betraying the fold, but at the same time giving us some revelation as to what it looks like inside?
Well, it's not that big, but I do think it causes the American people to say, look, these people deceived us or misled us, or they lied to us about the real reasons going into this war, which we don't like. And it will cause, I think, Americans to say, look, let's get that whole crowd out of there. And it does taint McCain in a sense, because the cause for which the war was fought, McClellan is saying, was democratic imperialism. This was the driving motivation. Yeah. Now, how he knew that and why he took the job to promote it on other grounds, I don't understand.
Maybe he's a slow learner.
Well, the real question, Chris, is when the Bush administration talked about weapons of mass destruction, clearly they were using this as the prosecutor's strongest argument or case. But did they know it was untrue? Now, Scott McClellan did not say they knew it was untrue. There's no doubt they were using this as cover for a real cause which they knew the American people would not support if we're sending guys to die to create some democracy in Baghdad.
But Pat, you and I are closer on this than most people think. When you ask somebody to give up their life, and certainly risk it, and we've lost 4,000 lives, a lot of people maimed, loss of limb is clear now, and Walter Reed, and anybody who walks around America sees it. You should tell them the reason, shouldn't you?
Yeah, well,
isn't that fair?
Well, Bush did tell them reason.
He gave them a reason. Did he give them the reason?
His speeches are saturated with this democratic imperialist idea that the only way America can be safe is end tyranny on this earth, democratize the world.
Let's take a smaller piece of this. This has to do with the CIA leak case, which we covered on this program for months, and we will forever remember because it has so much to do with the war, the selling of the war, dishonestly, as has been argued in this book, and the way it was covered up, if you will. We're joining us right now David Gregory, my colleague, who he and I have been working this case now, Shuster rather, David Shuster, for years now. David, this must bring back a lot to you in terms of what role Scooter Libby played. He should have gone to prison. He was convicted of 4 felonies. He got his sentence commuted by the president. Here, McClellan says he was guilty as charged. Ari Fleischer, just on this show, said Scooter was guilty as charged. No question there. A cloud, however, still over Karl Rove and the VP.
Well, and Chris, keep in mind that prosecutor Patrick Fitzgerald said that Vice President Cheney had brought a cloud over the White House, and there had long been some argument between Republicans and Democrats or whoever about Vice President Cheney's role. What Scott McClellan has done, without getting into the weeds here, he has backed up every argument that has been made that Vice President Cheney was at the heart of this thing, that Vice President Cheney led the conspiracy that some will allege. And the other part about it, Chris, is remember, it came at a trial that Vice President Cheney wrote out some of those talking points for Scott McClellan. Well, he adds new levels of detail to that, which raises even more questions. Why were the prosecutors handling Dick Cheney in such sort of a soft fashion, and should they have been more aggressive?
That's a great question. Howard, you were covering this case. Newsweek did just such a great job on this, you and Isikoff. How come the vice president, smiling on his way in the courtroom there, is fingered in this book by the White House press secretary as the leader of the ring, the one that oversaw the whole effort to discredit the Wilsons, and yet no charge?
Well, that's the question, one of the key questions begged by the book. McClellan describes Cheney as the magic man, the man who could make things happen in the White House almost with no strings or visible means of doing so. And I think Scott felt personally burned, which he was, by having to go out there and say what he had to say on the podium. He wasn't told the straight story in any detail by Karl Rove or Scooter Libby. And I think ultimately McClellan blames Dick Cheney for that, for basically ruining his reputation for truthfulness. And a lot of these books are payback, Chris. We learn a lot from payback, but this was big-time
Dick
payback.
Cheney had a meeting with the president. He gets a call from the White House. Andy Card, chief of staff, says, you got to exonerate Scooter. Directly after a meeting with the vice president and the president, he knew where he got his orders from.
Well, look, what you're getting at here is the real motivation of this guy, McClellan. His credibility was put out there. It was used to cover up falsehoods, and he transmitted what he believes were lies. He was made a fool out of. He leaves the White House as something of a joke, and he's saying, I came in to do the right thing. This bitterness, that's the real motivation behind this.
What's wrong with a whore escaping the whorehouse?
There's nothing
Is there something wrong with it?
No, but you ought to, when you discuss it, you ought to say, what was the lady doing?
Well, that's right. We think we know it because he tells us in the book. He admits his misdeeds here, and he's come clean. I see this as a parallel to the insider in the tobacco case. Somebody comes out and tells us how they fixed it. Anyway, David Shuster, Howard Fineman, this is cutting very close to home, this story. We've been covering this thing for months, and I thank God we're getting some clarity here, even if it comes from somebody you consider the skunk at the party.